A lot of people who go offshore follow the cookie cutter methodology. And while that may be okay for actually setting up your offshore company, it's not going to really work on reducing your taxes legally. But there's another area where people often falter, and that's they can't get a bank account for this company. And so today I'm going to share with you the biggest mistake people make when getting an offshore company bank account. Hey guys, I'm Andrew Henderson. If you want to learn how Nomad Capitalist helps 7 and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors go offshore legally, go where they're treated best, go to nomadcapitalist.com. And what I want to talk about today is a mistake that I've seen for many years. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about what you may be bombarded by if you are getting into this offshore stuff. You know, a lot of times I talk to folks who are working with us here at Nomad Capitalist who say they've spent months or oftentimes years researching offshore stuff, going onto forums, clicking on Google ads and looking at all the different strategies. People often come with ideas of what their plan should be, and sometimes those are okay ideas that just need a bit more development. Sometimes they're just absolutely terrible ideas. And so I'll tell you what I got in my email box the other day. It was an ad from a company that's one of the big cookie cutter offshore banking and offshore corporate services companies. And what I see is basically what I see when I go down the street here and I go to my local McDonald's. I open the email and I got a picture of a bunch of different countries, a bunch of different flags, a bunch of different options of where I can incorporate my company. And they have Mauritius, and they have Hong Kong, and they have Seychelles, and they have Belize, and so many other places. And when you're just starting out, I understand this can be very overwhelming, but can also be very enticing. I remember very early on in my days of researching this stuff, it was very intriguing, the idea of, putting my company here. I would go to a certain country, to a certain place, and I would enjoy it. And there was almost like this emotional longing for wanting to have a piece of that place in your life, that, if you opened a company or had a bank account, that you would feel like you had the excitement or the energy of that place in your life. And I think a lot of people start out doing that. I call this the McDonald's approach, where, here's the menu, pick which one you want. Okay? I mean, how many times have you gone to McDonald's or gone to a burger restaurant or gone to wherever, and you get a menu of things where they have lots of different burgers or sandwiches or whatever, and you don't really know the difference? Like, what's the difference between a quarter pounder and a double cheeseburger and the new King Royal burger? Like, I don't even know. And so a lot of times you just kind of like, that one. And you just feel compelled because it's your turn in line. You just pick the first one that comes to mind. And I don't want you to do that when it comes to setting up your offshore company. Now, we've talked in other videos, you can watch those here on our channel, about how a lot of the offshore tax havens that have absolutely no requirements have become shunned by banks. You're not going to be able to open a bank account. But even if you open a company in a good jurisdiction, if you don't have a banking plan, you're going to have a problem. And so I know a lot of folks personally don't like to keep as much money in banks. They like to invest it. They like to keep it in cryptocurrency, whatever. When you're running a business, unless your business is in the cryptocurrency business, or unless you have some kind of specific type of business, you're going to need a bank to fulfill and to facilitate payments from your customers, whether those payments come through credit card, through bank transfer, through PayPal, whatever the case may be. And so business banking is really a lot more important. And so I've had a lot of people come to me over the last couple of years saying that they had an account that was rejected. They could never open the account. They opened an account somewhere that was closed, and they're just having problems opening accounts. I've told you stories of people who've come and they opened the company. Opening the company is easy. Making the company actually work from a tax reduction standpoint is difficult because none of the cookie cutter companies tell you that. They'll just say, hey, here's your company, it's zero tax here, totally ignoring that where you live and how your company is set up actually is what dictates the tax that you pay, not where the company is. At least the big majority of it. But I see people who, they haven't been able to use their offshore companies for a year in some cases because they couldn't get a bank account. And so what you have to understand is there are questions that a bank is going to ask you about your business. And so these are important to know the answers to before you figure out where you want to go and bank. When I first started doing this stuff, I remember one of the big places that stood out in my mind was Hong Kong. Every one of these local Chinese agencies in Hong Kong would sell you a company. Most of these Hong Kong companies, they compete on price. So it's 7888 or 7588 or whatever the price may be, Hong Kong dollars to set up. They don't give you any tax advice. They don't help you figure out how to collect money. If you're collecting credit cards, absolutely forget it. But they all compete. And then people would get in and they would say, well, what do I do now? The people at this company mill won't tell me. The one thing that the company mills would provide was a referral to HSBC in Hong Kong. Now, if you've been watching our stuff for a while, you know that we're big fans of HSBC around here. It's about the world's worst bank. And so, but for years, including after I started talking about how HSBC Hong Kong was no longer accepting any companies, including people who worked at the bank and had side companies, they would do consulting on the weekends. They would try and open an account at their own bank, and they were rejected. Lived in Hong Kong, worked at the bank, everyone knew who they were. They couldn't even get an account. I started saying that. I still saw plenty of these these company mills recommending HSBC Hong Kong, and people would go there and just get rejected. Now, when it comes to business banking, there is a higher chance of rejection. I don't have a 100% success rate. Our success rate is somewhere in the 90% of people we send to go into banks. We say, hey, here's the right bank for you, or the right 2 or 3 banks for you. We're a little over 90 or 92%, something like that. But if you're sending people to HSBC in Hong Kong, for years now the success rate has been about 1%. And so, this old world mentality of you open a company here, you get a bank account there, does not work anymore. Cookie cutter banking does not work. There's no way that I can tell you if you open a company here, this is where you should bank. Number one, banks offshore have higher requirements in terms of due diligence, in terms of paperwork. Banks onshore are probably going to require a higher deposit, and they're going to want to see that you've got a business that's been running for a while. And so some of the questions you have to ask yourself is this a new business or is it an established business that I'm moving over from another country? If it's a newer business, you probably want to start with an offshore bank, maybe one that you can open remotely, even a fintech or a challenger bank that you would start with. You don't want to be there forever because as your business grows, you don't want to be stuck in a fintech, in my opinion, and you want to have options besides just being in some bank in a little island. But you can start there. What is the revenue of your business? How much can you deposit? A lot of banks that we work with for good, companies, they want $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 in some cases. There are alternatives to those, but if you want the best banks, that's what they're going to require. How many transactions are you doing in a month? Who are you paying? What countries are you paying? Certain countries have restrictions. I've talked before about how if you're doing business in the Middle East or North Africa, you probably want a bank account in somewhere like Dubai, because your bank in Singapore or the United States is not going to really like that as much, but Dubai gets it. They know what it's like. Same thing if you're doing business in Eastern Europe. You might want a bank account in Cyprus or in Latvia or in a place like Georgia, where they understand that part of the world and it doesn't freak them out to hear the word Russia. Where are your employees located? How are you paying them? How long do you intend to keep the account? What's the purpose of the account? Is it a transactional account? Is it a place where you're just going to store money? Is it an account that you're opening up for one single transaction, or is it an ongoing business? What's the nature of the business? What do you do? And so, I have worked with folks who are in, let's say, the casino consulting business. I've had a couple people like that. They consult in the casino industry. They work for, online gambling or actual physical gambling. We've had other folks who are in other things that are deemed controversial by some folks. They're going to go to certain types of banks. You're going to have to perhaps deposit more or be open to different types of banks if you're in that industry. But if I'm a company mill and I'm opening a company for someone in Hong Kong or Cyprus or Panama, and that guy's in the gambling consulting business, and I just send him along to my normal bank, he's going to be rejected, right? There are industries that are tough. Some banks don't like e-commerce. Some banks, that's all they do is e-commerce. Okay, so all these banks are different. Now, you would say, well, Andrew, you're talking about, why your services are better, and I suppose I am. Remember, I started Nomad Capitalist as a blog. And people started asking me questions about, hey, how are you doing this and how can I do it? And it started, okay, well, I'll help you. And briefly I helped people for free, and that didn't work. No one really listened. And then I started charging and building it into a business. And I wanted to build this the way that I as a consumer saw this, because I get frustrated being jammed into one option. First of all, I think if you're running an offshore business, you need at least 2 bank accounts. One bank account's not enough. You need a redundancy, because you may be sending payments to certain people. You may want a place just to store money in case there's a problem with one account. You want redundancies. And if you're just used to doing business onshore, you probably aren't used to that potentially. But if you're going offshore, you need at least 2 bank accounts. And so just being referred to one is not enough, in my opinion. But I've come to realize, in addition to wanting redundancies, you also want banks that suit your needs and understand you. I have had banks that don't understand me. I had a bank once that dealt with companies that were in the offshore company business. they formed offshore companies, and they were one of these mills, but they charged, not a lot of money. They did it on volume. They provided no level of service. And so we have a different approach here at Nomad Capitalist. And so that one bank lumped me in with all these other people. And they said, well, why are you charging these prices? I said, well, I'm offering a holistic solution. We're doing someone's domestic tax work, foreign tax work, their company formation. We're closing down this company over here. We're migrating. We're doing transfer pricing. We're getting their residents, their tax residents, to help them facilitate using the offshore company in a tax-friendly way. We're doing all of that. And they didn't understand it because they were just used to guys who said, Seychelles company, $972, beep, 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 beep. And then people would just use those companies. Many of them, I'm sure, got into trouble because they didn't know how the laws actually worked. They didn't know you can't just sit in the United States and have a Seychelles company and magically not pay tax. But that bank didn't get it. Now I have banks who do get it. I have certain banks who are comfortable that we just store money there. And that's the purpose. We don't do transactions. And so that is going to be a bank that perhaps is higher quality but more risk averse. And so they're happy to let you park money there. And so for me, banking as a business, and if you're just starting out a brand new business, again, you're going to find a small offshore account. You're not going to get a great account in a high-level jurisdiction because those high-level jurisdictions and their banks generally want you to have some experience. But if you're just starting out, that's what you're going to do. As you develop more and more money, you're going to want to build your banking contingency plan. You're going to want to build out your resources. You're going to want to make sure that you can make payments around the world. I've been asked, Andrew, why don't you recommend fintechs? Why are you fiddling with these banks? Because when you're dealing with millions of dollars, you don't want to keep it in some place that's the entire bank is on an app. And you've got to write the name of the bank before your name in the recipient's name, and you can't receive payments from certain types of people. So as your business grows, you want flexibility. That's what I think has been missing in the offshore company industry for a long time. Not only the tax part, which is we've talked about a lot before, but also this banking part. Another question to ask yourself is, are you receiving payments by credit card, by PayPal, etc.? That's a big issue. If you have a company in Hong Kong and your bank account's somewhere else, if you have a company in the EU and the bank account's in a different country, which is common for people who have companies in places where they don't live, you often have to get a bank account somewhere else, then you may have trouble using things like Stripe or PayPal. And so you've got to figure out how that's going to work. You may need a multi-company structure, and then how do you handle the banks for that? So there's a lot of questions that are involved. I don't take the McDonald's approach. I want you not to take the McDonald's approach. And I'm saying this as a guy who, when I first started this, was kind of excited by that because you look at all the pretty pictures of all the pretty countries and, oh, it's so nice, and imagine I could have a company here and it feels really, you feel cool, right? It's that sort of James Bond effect that I've talked about before where you feel very international. It feels kind of sexy. But you're going to do that at your peril. Make sure you find the right business bank accounts or you're going to have trouble using your offshore company. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.